This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good evening, and welcome to the Lit Show on Thursday, the 8th of June. I'm your host, Paul Hazzard. And with me tonight is recently retired Principal, Dr. Julie Greer. On tonight's show, we talk about teacher identity. Let's get to it.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Good evening and welcome to the show this evening. Lovely sunny evening on the 8th of June, and not too long to go now until the end of term. I'm just waiting for my guests to join, and I think that should be able to happen soon. So tonight we're hoping to talk about teacher identity. I suppose it's something that, we don't really think about an awful lot. It's just something we kind of assume as a mantle. We become teachers and certain things are expected of us and we behave in certain ways. I know around here where I live, quite often, you would be known by your profession or by your job. So, quite often I would be, Paul Hazzard, the teacher. And you get that kind of add-on or moniker or something that kind of goes along with your name. So, we do all have an identity, and I suppose the profession, teachers have an identity. They behave in certain ways, there are expectancies, and, they fall into ways of behaving in that way, managing classes, and so on. Anyway, before we get to it tonight, we're going to listen to the news.
It's time for a fresh start to language learning. Pearson EdXL's new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills. Through inclusive and relatable content, the new Pearson EdXL MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. Find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL GCSE 24.
This programme has been brought to you by the Happy Confident Company. Our clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health programme will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and wellbeing tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.happyconfident.com.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The Guardian covers news about the downturn in the numbers of pupils choosing languages and creative arts subjects at GCSE and A-level. The article quotes provisional figures for England, which suggests the exam entries for languages such as German, French and Spanish have fallen at A-level by as much as 17%. GCSE entries have stayed broadly the same. The article goes on to contrast this with the rise in A-level entries for computing by 15% on last year and a 12% increase at GCSE. Business studies is also increasingly popular at GCSE. Data from Ofqual suggests that entries for A-level and GCSEs are on the rise, but that not all subjects are seeing the benefit. Performing arts subjects are also seeing a reduction in numbers at A-level and GCSE, as are those in the area of art and design. The move to more vocational style subjects has been welcomed by some, but has caused others to worry about the loss of creativity for the next generation. Schools Week reports on Capita, the outsourcing company paid to run SATs, and its decision to increase workload for those it employs to mark. Technical issues have already caused a delay to marking, with some not able to access necessary training. Now teachers say the rates they are paid are also being slashed. Rate cards show how those marking some SATs papers could receive as little as 2p per segment, down from 6p last year. And whilst the overall fee this year is likely to be similar to last, the number of responses markers are expected to mark has increased by over 50%. It is feared that this could lead to rushed marking, which may then lead to errors. Some critics also predict teachers walking away, leaving a backlog of unmarked tests. The deadline to return marks to schools is in July. TES reveals the names of those appointed to the expert panel to review relationships and sex education, known as RSE, and the health education curriculum. The guidance will be published for consultation in the autumn. The 5 members of the panel were appointed after Education Secretary Gillian Keegan wrote to schools in March to ensure they were complying with their legal obligations to publish their RSE approach and share curriculum materials with parents. The government has been criticised for taking too long to issue guidance, amid concerns schools and teachers felt left in limbo. The panel members are Professor Dame Leslie Regan, Professor of Obstetrics and Gynecology and Women's Health Ambassador, Sir Hamid Patel, CEO of Star Academies, Helena Brothwell, Regional Director of School Improvement for David Ross Academies Trust, and Alistair Henderson, a barrister specialising public law, human rights and equality law. The final panel member is Isabel Trowler, Chief Social Worker for Children and Families in England. Finally, vaping continues to make the news, with ministers stating they want schools to be part of the crackdown. The Chief Medical Officer for England, Professor Sir Chris Whitty, however, probably summed up the key messages best in an article for The Times. He said, "If you smoke, vaping is much safer. If you don't smoke, don't vape." He goes on to say that companies trying to addict children for profit are behaving in a shameful way, because we do not know the long-term effects of many vape ingredients. The government also announced that the issue of vaping would be added to its review of RSHE curriculum. However, some have already criticised the information provided by government so far as lacking depth and detail. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, this week I'm going to take a look at report writing. I'll ask the burning question, can ChatGPT write my school reports? Yes, I know there are other AIs out there, but this is the most well known. Before I start, just give me a yes or no in your head. Will it be able to? So, first up, I blatantly asked it, can you write school reports? And ChatGPT said, certainly, I can help you write the school report. Please provide me with the topic or subject of the report, along with any specific guidelines or requirements you have been given. Additionally, provide me with any relevant information or key points you'd like me to include in the report. Okay then. I said, James is good at history and weaker in maths than English. This generated a 961-word report. Here is the opening paragraph. In this report, we will explore James's academic strengths and areas for improvement in different subjects. James demonstrates a strong aptitude for history while he faces challenges in mathematics when compared to his proficiency in English. In conclusion, James exhibits a strong aptitude for history, showcasing a profound understanding of historical concepts and critical thinking skills. His performance in English is commendable, with excellent written and verbal communication skills. However, James faces challenges in mathematics, particularly in problem solving and advanced mathematical reasoning. By providing him with the necessary support, encouragement and resources, we can help James strengthen his mathematical abilities and achieve a more balanced academic profile. Oh wow. Right, so what if I get even lazier? I typed, write a primary school report for Tom. This produced a 477-word report covering English, maths, science, social studies, personal and social development, resilience and perseverance, responsibility and organisation, finishing with an area for development being handwriting. ChatGPT doesn't half know what Tom is like. My conclusion, given enough information, it could give you a decent report. However, it'd work best as a proofreader / tidier-upper. Give it a brief report and ask it to make it look more professional, or ask it to write the same report in 5 different ways. Letting ChatGPT give you the vocabulary will save you time. Just remember that it uses American spellings. Quite frankly, I was quite blown away by what was produced. This is definitely a time saver when you're trying to say the same thing in different ways. Do you use AI to help you with anything? Let us know at TT Radio Official. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
This programme has been brought to you by the Happy Confident Company. Our clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health programme will help your pupils thrive. In only 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to deliver social and emotional learning and wellbeing tools throughout your school. To find out more, visit us at www.happyconfident.com.
It's time for a fresh start to language learning. Pearson EdXL's new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent and accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills. Through inclusive and relatable content, the new Pearson EdXL MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. Find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL GCSE 24.
Welcome back, everybody, and a special hello to our guest, Dr. Julie Greer. Hello, Julie. How are you?
Hi, Paul. Yeah, I'm really well, thank you.
That's good. Great. So, Julie, like myself, you're recently retired. How's that all going?
Not so well.
Not so well.
No, it's going really well in the sense that I'm doing lots, which is great.
Good.
But yeah, keeping busy certainly.
That's good. Yeah. And Julie, you were a principal then, and a bit like myself, you had an interest in teacher identity.
Yes, so I was a head teacher for nearly 30 years for primary school in Yorkshire, and yeah, just loved my job really. And I suppose one of the things that brought about my interest in teacher identity was being asked to write a book on workload, which is somewhat ironic for anybody who knows me, because I do, as you've already gathered, sort of throw myself into most things. But
you do.
But as a result, I really, I wanted to try and write a useful, I suppose, useful advice for particularly teachers coming into the profession around how to manage their workload. And you really can't separate teacher identity from that. And the more I read about it, the more I researched, the more that became really evident. And I suppose what it enabled me to recognise was that teacher identity had been so strong for me throughout my career, from the very first sort of day in my first paid teaching post in Southwark and London. It started to, as that sense of who I am as a teacher has really sort of stayed with me, but also evolved. And I think that's some of what it would be good to really try and unpick.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Julie, then just for our listeners, what is teacher identity? What do you see as teacher identity being?
Yeah, it's certainly it's a complex notion, really, and often is interchangeable with sort of teacher self. Some people talk about teacher self, other people talk about teacher identity. But the way that I like to think about it is that it's a sort of mixture of the you that you would like to be, the teacher I would like to be, and the teacher that you are, and that comes together from probably your very early notions of being a teacher. I mean, it's quite a unique, in many ways, it's quite a unique profession, isn't it? Because we all experience schools, we all experience being taught. Well, most people do. We experience, being in schools and colleges as institutions, and then we also, because everybody has that sort of universal experience. Everybody has an opinion on it as well. So when you go into the profession, you're already sort of shaped by not just who you want to be, but how I guess that's been formed by all the other teachers that you've come across and all those other depictions of teachers as well, in the press and the media. And now is quite an interesting time, isn't it, for teacher identity, with so many teachers, I suppose in many ways sort of demanding a change to terms and conditions, asking questions about the role of Ofsted, for example. And although it would be fair to say it's not that those questions haven't been asked before, but they are current in the media, aren't they? And I think it's certainly true that the media plays a big part in that. We're getting back to that sense of. I mean, I suppose I could ask you, Paul, what sort of a teacher would you say you are?
Yeah, that's a very good question, you see. And I come from a lineage of teachers. My parents were both teachers. Many of their brothers and sisters were teachers. And I have a brother and two sisters. And at varying stages, we were all teachers. Yeah. So there's quite a lineage there of, or quite a history really, of teaching in the family. And I remember as a young teacher in training, my parents would both have said to me, what the expectations were. This is how a teacher behaves. This is the way a teacher dresses. This is what's expected of you. Yeah, so it's very interesting. I suppose then as well, one of the jobs I had at one stage was a teacher tutor. So basically I looked after student teachers coming into the school. And one of the things...
Huge responsibility.
Oh, yeah. But one of the... And it was a disparaging remark, but it was made quietly in the staff room, is teachers would always say, I think he'll be all right. He looks like a teacher. And there's something...
if you look to go into gender and the impact of other people's perceptions of teacher identity in relation to gender. I mean, have we got enough time for that?
Not tonight. No, not tonight. We don't. That'll be for another time.
Don't get me started.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, and you're right. Two of my 4 children are teachers, and they're certainly keen to be doing really well. And I suppose I was really young as a head teacher as well, so I was a head teacher for all of their young lives as well, to a great extent. So I think then that I would still say I have a teacher identity, even though I've not been in the classroom. I still do support schools through work I do with a London borough, for example, and I have a big association with initial teacher education still, which is great, and I still sort of teach or supervise master students, so I have quite an involvement still within education. But if you asked me, like on the spot, I would say I have a teacher identity. And I think that's quite interesting, isn't it? That's really embedded. I think the other thing, and I anyone who knows me you could probably say these words for me, but I will always, if I'm talking, and I always say, well, actually, if you broke my arm, if you sort of snapped it in half, you'd see inclusion, written round my, my humerus like a stick of rock. And because I think, I love a visual metaphor anyway, but
that's a very graphic one you've given us there.
It's quite late at night. It's past 9 o'clock. You're okay.
You might have to give out a warning with this show.
But I think it's very early on I realised that I didn't have the skills to be able to teach the children that were in my class, and it was as I mentioned in the middle of a large estate of sort of flats and housing, in London, and I'd done all my teacher training in Bath and in a convent school in Chippenham. I was, but
Yeah.
something that I recall really, really strongly was that when I went in those days, you'd go for a sort of Ilia pool. You'd get interviewed, and you would then be assigned to both a borough and a school. And I remember. The inspector at the time, it was actually John Stannard, who went on to do all of the sort of primary learning project and stuff. Saying, do you feel ready to teach? And I said no. And I suppose you could argue it's a gamble, but I suppose you could also, reflecting now, and I suppose I'm only really thinking about this now, that's part of my personality. That's part of my, I guess, my stubbornness, but also my, my confidence that I felt able to say no. And actually, it was the right answer in the sense that he said, "Well, that's fine because we will help you now. We will use this year of your I can't even think what we called it then. It wasn't an NQT, was it? But anyway, whatever that first year of teaching was, to to help you become the teacher that you want to be." And that was so empowering, and that was so freeing, and it enabled me to recognize that you didn't have to come in with a shaped identity. You could keep growing it. And I think I'm quite passionate about that, because so much of the information from research that shows this sort of the dropout of teachers leaving teaching very early on, within the first 3 to 5 years. So often what teachers are saying when they're leaving is that they're not coping. It's workload, it's behavior, it's a number of these things. But in truth, you could probably argue that it's all about dissonance, that it's not the job that they thought it was going to be. That's not the job they imagined that they were going into. They weren't the teacher they thought they would be. And you work in initial teacher education. I mean, it's why we're also so passionate about trying to, if you like, shake the tree to be able to make sure that these teachers, go into teaching seeing themselves as teachers of all children. That identity is tough. It is tough. It's a tough job.
It's a very tough job, yeah. You said a couple of interesting things there that really resonated with me. One was, maybe not unlike yourself. I went to primary school, I went to grammar school, I went on to university. I spent 2 years in teaching in France, and then I came back to Northern Ireland. And I think my first 3 years were in a grammar school, and that was all fine. That was contract work in those days. And then I went to an all-intake secondary school, and that was a culture shock. Yeah. And so that was, 3 and 2, 5 years after, getting a degree. Yeah. I was faced with children. I didn't know what to do. These children didn't learn in the way that I had been taught. And my 5 years experience in grammar schools here and in France had taught me. Yeah. And a bit like you, I had to kind of just pause and think and work out, what am I about here? What's going on? What do I need to do? These children need me, and I need to be different. How do I do that? It's very interesting. That resonated with me a lot. Yeah.
That confidence to recognize that you need to be different. I mean, there's a huge amount of within teacher identity about I guess it's that sort of looking glass self, that being reflective. Now, reflective is quite an interesting word. It's certainly sort of popular in qualitative study research, for example, but I just like to think of it as being like a sort of meta reflection. So you reflect on your reflections, whether others would agree with me or not. But I think if you think about it, so it's not just looking in a mirror. It's sort of, it's looking in a mirror, thinking about what you're seeing about yourself, and then it's returning to that at, at a later date, or it's, and that's why, if you can, and it's so difficult to do when you're full on, particularly in your first years of teaching, but if you can just write down like simple notes to yourself, write down, I love post-its, write down just a couple of words on a post-it each night, or, just do a single line drawing, every night when you can, and then return to those and see what they say to you, see what you think about what you thought then, even if that might be a day later or 5 days later, or 3 months later. I think I know time is really hard, but I do think in terms of developing your teacher self, that actually giving yourself permission and giving yourself, simple tasks in which you can be reflective and then reflect on those reflections is so valuable.
Yeah. And I wonder, is there a place in schools for that being structured? I know I mentioned we have teacher tutors here, but, teacher tutors are busy people. They need to get their beginning teachers or newly qualified teachers into school, get them sorted out and get them up and running. And there isn't, as you say, there isn't always time. And, I don't know. Is there that commitment as well to take that kind of level of interest in young teachers and really bring them on and develop them, I wonder?
I mean, they deserve it, don't they? I mean, our
Well, they
children,
definitely
our
do.
children deserve to have teachers,
Yeah.
being invested in. And, I'm a big fan of supervision, and tried a whole variety of different ways. With teaching's the only frontline profession where, you're not required to have supervision, and often you're managing hugely complex things in terms of safeguarding and just managing a child's progress is can be harrowing, so it is. I think, but it's about finding ways within your team, making sure that that there's a culture within the school that you go to where actually, even if it's a conversation at the end of the day with someone else within your year group, or someone else in the same key stage, or even someone else at the opposite end of the school, for example, that some way of actually validating that process, because I think, again, schools are so good at supporting each other in that informal way. The difficulty with not ever validating those conversations is that they sort of get lost, or they just become expected, so you don't value them in the same way that that might be useful to you. So I think there's scope in there, and I think it is all tied in with your teacher identity, because if you see yourself as as part of your identity is someone who I'm a teacher who needs a lot of support to be sure I'm doing the right thing. If my identity is I'm a teacher who worries a lot about what that my children aren't making progress. If you have a slightly negative aspect to your identity, and I suppose what we've not really explored is the sense that you can have multiple layers. Really, you can be all of these things, all of these things at different times. That's the that's the aspect of your identity that's much more flexible, really. And then you have your sort of core identity, which is this sort of what you hold on to, I suppose, which is still based in that belief of who you want it to be as well. But yeah, I think if we can find ways to sort of validate those informal conversations that really then support, both support, but I talk a lot about turning the thermostat. We don't always have to do anything radical. We don't have to completely turn the heating on or off. But if we just turn that thermostat, turn that dial slightly, it can make a huge amount of difference. So if in those conversations, if you not formalize to the extent that it becomes a tick box process, do you know what I mean? But actually,
I do definitely know what you mean. Yeah.
But a structure and a system whereby if you know that the person that you're going to have a sort of regular chat to actually does struggle with this aspect or is really confident in this aspect, then it's about shaping those conversations to just sort of, I guess, to boost up, to remind, to spot the positive, to notice and support the teacher that you're talking to notice where they have actually gone right, where it has worked well, and to build on that in the same way that we would want to do that with our children in the class. It's a similar process.
Yes, yeah. And yeah, there are, very few opportunities really for that to happen. I know in Northern Ireland, we have what we call PRSD, Performance Review and Staff Development, and that's very formal. And you have an observation, you have a discussion, you have a pre-planning meeting, and so on, and that's all fine and well. Mind you, it's not happening at the minute with union action, and that's a problem. But I do agree with you. When you put those things into a formal context, they become something very different. But a senior or an experienced teacher who takes an interest in you, and there's an open door at the end of the day, and you go along, you have a chat, you kind of close your day before you go home or whatever, that's very, very beneficial. It's a very powerful thing as well, because I think that's almost like person-centered advice. They can tell you something very specific to you that someone in a formal context or setting couldn't maybe say. Yeah, and you can build up much more rapport and much more trust with that kind of person.
I'm a big fan of professional conversations. I think it's a nice, it's an easy, it's an attainable way to think about both sort of stepping up that notion of a chat at the end of the day, so it falls in a way that anybody can be having those, and it actually sort of professionalizes yourself. So you're bringing your professional self to these conversations rather than your tired, exhausted, oh my goodness, I want to go home. To those conversations. Actually, can we make time for a professional conversation at the end of the day? I mean, you have to be careful that there aren't notions of capability within that. That's certainly not what I mean. We need a professional conversation. No, I don't mean that. I just mean that let's take the teachers to take ownership of their own professional identity, but also their professional development in that way, I think is really important.
Yeah. I suppose something you mentioned just reminded me there as well. I think I began to make leaps and bounds, I think, as a teacher when I moved to one school, and they were very keen on team teaching. Now, obviously, team teaching is very expensive. You have two teachers in a room. You have quite a bit of manpower in there and so on, and there needs to be accommodation on the timetable and so on, But that business of planning that lesson together, that weekly lesson or a couple of lessons, delivering the lesson together and being in the room shoulder to shoulder with that senior colleague, and then that kind of informal debrief afterwards or semi-formal debrief afterwards, I found that very, very empowering. I tried to kind of, when I was in a senior position, to try to get it going again, but it's just a very expensive thing in many ways for schools to do again.
I think, in the context of teacher identity, we have to recognise that personalities, form part of our teacher identity, characteristics, and certainly would be true that for some teachers they would find that more difficult than others. It very much depends how it's set up, and I think again it's about whether it's something that the leadership decide this is what you're going to do, but actually don't necessarily put in the structures to manage that, then it'll fall flat quite quickly. But if if actually it's much more of a notion of, well, actually, these are our goals. This is what we'd like you to try and do. These are a number of ways in which you could be supporting each other's, professional development, this half term or this term. Something that, I know a number of teachers really enjoyed. I don't know if they enjoyed doing, but they were really supported to recognize the value of it is to sort of video themselves as well, and to then
Mm-hmm.
that video, that sort of micro teaching that we used to do way back in the old days, but in a much more modern sense. And in truth, you don't have to share that video with anyone else if you don't want to. You can just look at it yourself. But of course, the more you can share and the more you can have those professional conversations around good practice,
Mm-hmm.
around where actually things could be better developed, or lessons where you felt actually that didn't go the way I planned. I'm not sure what happened. Let's unpick this then. And we are committed to doing that, I think, through with ECTs, with early career teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, teaching is you grow as a teacher, don't you? You grow as a professional. Your identity, is able to be flexible and grow and shape with you.
Yeah.
Sort of get a bit stuck and static, and your skills get stuck and static as well. So I think anything that supports ongoing teacher development is great.
But I think that's a very important point as well, that we do grow as teachers, and then our identity kind of moves with that a little bit as well. And it's a bit maybe like, climbing the mountains. You're plodding along, going along, not realizing until you reach a point and you look back down the mountain and you see how far you've come. It's kind of the same in school. You get a few years under your belt, you're thinking, you're reflecting and reflecting on reflection. And then a new wave of teachers come in and you kind of think, oh my goodness, I remember I used to be like that.
Yeah.
And you kind of realize the ground has shifted. Yeah.
I was thinking maybe I'm terrible on remembering. My children laugh at me because I can't remember, three word names or anything like that. But I think it's either called 12 Peaks or 9 Peaks. But it's a film by he was a Gurkha. I think it's called Nimsdal. But it's the most amazing film. But I was thinking, when you were talking about going up a mountain, actually it is more like sort of this idea of going up. He went up I'm so sorry for anyone who knows the proper answer to this, but he was going up all the peaks in the Himalayas.
Yeah.
And actually maybe teaching like that, in the sense that even in your in your training, you can feel like you can suddenly get to the top and you can see around, you can see a vista, and then you realize you've got to go back down, and then you've got to go up another one. But actually it's about taking the time. And I think this is really where those teachers with strong teacher identities do have those moments to stop and take in that sort of awe and wonder, if you like, the joy of the job, the joy of teaching.
Yeah.
And I talk quite a lot about the joy of teaching, because I do, I think it is joyful. And, I'm sure people will be listening thinking, oh my goodness, what is she talking about? But I love the job. It was really difficult, frequently. But actually, a strong part of my teacher identity was, I suppose, was also having those characteristics of being able to spot the positive, to notice the good in people, to notice where it's going right. It's very easy to see where things are going wrong. I think it's too easy. We have to work sometimes to see what's going well, and that's not being, having a very sort of idealistic attitude. I genuinely think that's what's possible, and will make a difference to whether you can sustain the job, or whether it can be too much for you.
Yeah. I think that's very important, that we do celebrate, and we celebrate even the small wins and the big wins, and we are busy. And we don't always have time to do that because the next peak is there. And, it's a hard climb, as you say, and we kind of feel we don't really have time to celebrate always. Yeah. I remember once telling a mentor, your story about the peaks reminded me about this. I remember telling a mentor once that I felt that teaching was a bit like Sisyphus, and Sisyphus was condemned to pushing the rock up to the top of the hill, and it would roll back down again. And I actually remembered very clearly. I remember the room we were in, although this is 30 plus years ago. And I remember he turned around and he just laid into me. How dare you say that? It's nothing like Sisyphus at all. Sisyphus climbed the same mountain. If you're climbing the same mountain all the time, you're not growing, young boy. And oh my God. Was I ever sorry I thought I had a good metaphor?
Well, now I'm feeling bad because actually I put a poem about Sisyphus at the start of my book on workload, so now I'm going to have to sort of recall.
Oh dear. Right. Still, I think in principle, I think the metaphor holds good, and that's the thing about metaphors; they only last. They don't cover everything. Yeah.
Checked, by the way, Paul. It's 14 peaks. Nothing is impossible. This film is called 14 peaks, not 9, not 12. 14 peaks.
14 peaks. We'll put that in the show notes anyhow, and when people are picking it up as a podcast, they'll be able to look that up. Yeah. I wonder then, Julie, just as I'm listening to you, I'm wondering how much, we've talked a lot about reflecting on reflection, and getting a lot of that from, maybe other people, mentors, for want of a better word, advisors, supporters, teacher tutors, and so on. I wonder how much does the situation and the circumstances that we're in, how much does that have an impact on our teacher identity? Like, for example, I said to you, I went to primary school, grammar school, university, and, floated away off and taught in lovely grammar schools, and it was all fantastic and wonderful, But then got a culture shock when I had to move to a secondary school and taught people who were not interested in the finer points of French verbs at all.
And not the way you were teaching them at that point, you see.
And very definitely not the way or the manner in which I was teaching them, yeah. So I'm just wondering how, the day-to-day knocks of the job have an impact on our identity.
Oh yeah, hugely. I mean, I think going back to that school childhood elements, it's often referred to as your sort of institutional biography, and again that really, I think it's a really important notion. Recognizing our own biographies and how our own narratives are built and made up, and how we use those. And I think that. So, for example, within these sort of institutional biographies, often we'll hold we'll remember really happy memories from our childhood. We don't remember, all of the days in school where actually maybe, we didn't go, or we were made to do PE without any PE kit, or made to, we do, if we think hard enough, we do remember some of those unpleasant memories. What we don't remember is all the mundane stuff in between.
We don't, yeah.
And actually, that a lot of that makes up the job of a teacher, and a lot of that often are the bits that teachers struggle with as well. So yes, teachers do find, often find, those children whose behaviour can present a challenge to teachers in their classroom. We know from teacher narratives that this can often be a sort of crunch point for them. But in truth, we also know that it's a lot of that mundanity. It's a lot of the oh my goodness, I've got to write reports now, and and I used to pride myself on reading every school report for all of the primary school children every year, and sign them and write a little comment. And for me, that was really important part of my head teacher identity, not because actually I wanted the children to know, and I wanted the parents to know that actually their child was important to me. So it was really important to read their reports. But I both loved it and loathed it at the same time in equal measure. Because in terms of the amount of time it took, you can imagine, was just... But I also wanted to validate the work that the teachers had put into writing them. I mean, what was it just before we came on? Someone talking about AI,
Yes, in the news, yes.
Reports, and because there is something, whilst it's an arduous process, and we could look at the impact in terms of attainment of writing reports, the process of writing reports, we're pretty sure, because it's part of an assessment for learning, that it would make a difference to how teachers teach if they do their reports in good enough time to still impact on the children. But also it does make a difference generally to the child's well-being, the family's well-being, and so me in turn as a head teacher reading those reports, I thought was really important to impact on the teacher's well-being, to actually recognise the work that they've put into it, and to feedback on them, and to thank them as well. I mean, it does make a difference, doesn't it? I think I probably went slightly off point somewhere, but
don't worry. Yeah. No, don't worry. Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right, and I think all communication emanating from school and landing home, I think it's all crucial stuff. We used to run half-termly assemblies where we would give out, merit certificates and kind of recognition and appreciation for something that students have done over and above what we would call the normal. And I was post-primary, of course, 11 to 19. And, you get to that age, and particularly the girls, you get to that teenage, and they're very self-conscious. And I used to always like running those assemblies like the Oscars, and you would call them up, and I remember one girl in particular, great girl, fantastic girl, but my goodness, she could be difficult. And I called out her, let's call her Lisa, and I said, and the award for whatever goes to Lisa. And she let a roar out of her. Oh my God, I'm scundered. And she stormed up onto the stage, big exaggerated steps, came across the stage, shook my hand, took the certificate and stuffed it up her jumper and walked on off the stage. And you kind of think, oh, well, sure, look, we're better doing it than not doing it and all of that, And I remember a while later, I don't know how long it was, but let's say it was 3 months later, 6 months later, I was doing a homeschool visit. We would have done a lot of that. And lo and behold, wasn't I in their house? And Mummy invited me in, as they do, and so on. And then we went to the kitchen. Will you have a cup of tea, Mr. Hazzard? Thank you. Didn't I look up on the kitchen cabinet? There's the certificate, pride of place in the kitchen. So, things we do like that are very, very important. And I always thought, well, I've only got the vocabulary for it now, but what I'm thinking is that validated my identity and what I do and why I do it very, very much. Because while it was happening, I thought, well, question this. Is it worthwhile? Is it, it's a lot. But yes, it is. Definitely is worthwhile.
Because, I sort of mentioned inclusion threw me like a stick of rock, but I'm going to pick you up because you said that she was difficult. And I think that's a really good tale in which you can see that her behaviour could be difficult. So and so because that's really important, again, thinking, about how, so children are not their behaviour, it's about how you can recognise that. And the more that you build those understandings into your own teacher identity as well, that and sometimes, lots of teachers will have struggled themselves at school. And that can be a really strong part of their own identity as well, isn't it?
Yes, that's an interesting thing, and it's probably something we haven't touched on, and we're kind of running out of time now to do it. But people's motivation for becoming teachers, because I think that's very, very linked to their identity.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
As well, we've got to remember that in primary schools, but also in secondary schools, so much of that, the teacher identity is also sort of bound up in those sort of historical and sociological sort of studies will show that they're bound in the sort of late 19th, early 20th century, and so others outside of also have this sense of what a teacher is, because they have this sort of notion of Mr. Chips, or they have this notion of a sort of in a Victorian or Edwardian school in front of a class, for example, and we've tried over the years now and then to sort of shake some of that perception, but somehow we keep coming back to it. Maybe we come back to it because it's the most effective, but I think there's a danger in which we come back to it because actually, the pressure to ensure that teachers stick within the identity that others want to impose upon them. This is what teachers look like. Maybe it's quite strong. I think that's an interesting one to explore, isn't it? But you've got all these things like forest schools now, and the needs of some children who maybe have found it really difficult to have their needs met within schools, traditional schools, but actually, probably most children would benefit from having a lot more, outdoor education and forest schools type approach to learning as well. So
I think very definitely, yes. Yeah. Yes, they very definitely would, yeah.
I don't know many teachers really wanting to be outside in wellies and raincoats all the time, though. But
yeah. And I suppose again, and I'm kind of wary of opening up another issue, but something a few other things we maybe should have got to. It's just that whole business of you alluded to it earlier, but how parents and the moment, the politics of the moment. I know we both avoid politics, but the climate, the times, how that shapes teachers' identity as well, because we can't avoid it, because parents tell us things, parents ring in, they say things, and this, that, and the other, and that does have an impact on us and who we are and how we behave.
No, definitely. I mean, it's a profession that is reliant on good relationships, isn't it? And I think, I'm trying to think if it's even possible to do the job without good relationships. Because even if maybe you're not, you don't. I'm trying to think of a teacher who maybe doesn't have good relationships with colleagues, for example, but would have good relationships with the children. I think if you had no good relationships, I don't think you could stay in the job, could you? You'd be very, very unhappy and make everybody else unhappy, I should think. But because relationships are so much at the core of it, it's sometimes we lose sight of that. So, as you mentioned, sort of different political sways, different sort of media interests, different at the moment you mentioned teacher strikes, and thinking about how again that changes the media perception. It certainly was true for nurses as well, wasn't it? In COVID, no wrong. These are the same people doing the same job in the same circumstances, and people just maybe wanting some change. And I think it's about how you maintain your identity, your strong an identity which enables you to stay passionate about your job when you're feeling overwhelmed by those external forces of media, of of social media, which really filters the sort of perceptions that are being thrown at you. You have to be really strong and real sense of self, don't you? A strong sense of confidence to be able to say, actually, we are doing a good job. We're doing a good job because actually we can see here, here, and here that this is working well. Actually, I recognise that I'm a good teacher. I'm teaching all children because this child here is doing this and this child here has done that. This group of children are able to do this. We have to hold on to that. It's like, I think, assessment is hugely important, isn't it? It enables us to recognise where children are at and how we can support them to do better. We can teach them to be better. That's our job.
I think that's very true. Yes, I really do, and I think we have a big job to inspire children and to kind of transmit some of that belief that we have. Because if our belief begins to falter, we will be really struggling to kind of transmit self-belief into those children. And I think you're right. We do need some protection and armor against, the media. And you mentioned social media, which I think is really, really divisive and very able to break teachers. We all carry our phones in our hands. So, parents making comments about teachers and social media in the evenings can be devastating.
Absolutely. It's just whispering in your ear, isn't it? And it's not to be on any sort of social media. I think when you're sort of when you're working in a community, I think it's about, again, how do you maintain good relationships? You maintain good relationships to an extent by wearing some rose-tinted specs as well as protecting yourself from from the arrows.
Yeah, and I do, and I think yes, you have to hold positive regard for everybody, and that includes times when you're getting it yourself. We used to say in briefings, now we did tell teachers to be very careful of their social media, and really they shouldn't be on there as a teacher, or at least not an identifiable teacher.
No, it should be in all sort of codes of conduct, really, and certainly sort of IT codes of conduct as well. I think it's really important for safeguarding purposes for them, but also for the families as well. I was just thinking, actually, when you were talking then, I'm not sure why it cropped into my head, but actually, I think having an identity as a fallible teacher is quite important, because I think sometimes, when you were saying about parents complaining, but actually sometimes it is really important to say sorry. That actually, if you believe you're infallible as a teacher, that your professional identity means that you can't be wrong, and that it's not okay for parents to question you. Actually, if you turn that on its head and think, well, how would you feel if you were the other side of that? And I think, and recognizing that as teachers, as school leaders as well, when something does go, a bit pear-shaped, something didn't happen the way we wanted it to. Sometimes sorry can be really difficult, but actually is really important and is really valued as well.
No, I would agree with you. Yes, I think it can be difficult. It definitely can be difficult, but I think you benefit from it in the long run. Yeah.
You have to be the best.
Julie, we are running out of time, but I have Hugo, and Hugo would like to ask a question. Hello, Hugo. Are you there? Hello, Hugo. We'll give Hugo a second to see if he can join us. But Hugo, are you there?
Hello,
Hello.
can you hear me?
We've got you now, Hugo. Yes, do you have a question?
Not really a question. I just wanna to participate. Well, first of all, sorry, but I haven't practiced my English for so long. I'm a teacher from Mexico, and I just wanna say that being a teacher is probably one of the most beautiful professions in the world.
I agree, Hugo.
Why?
Absolutely. Yes, why?
Yeah. Because you are in front of a lot of people, okay? So it's not just about giving the class and the grammar. I mean, the topic you are giving, it is about giving experiences, okay? Probably help some students who really need to, because they sometimes are going through difficult times. So
Yes.
in that case, you can also help them. Not, as I said before, not just give the class and that's it. So I just wanted to say that teaching is really good, and I just joined you guys. And again, sorry, but I haven't practiced my English, and I did my best. Thank you.
Good. It sounds like you have
You
a strong
certainly
professional
did.
identity, Hugo. That's really good.
Yes, you do. And Hugo, your English was excellent. Yes, superb. Thank you very much for your contribution.
No, thank you for listening to me.
Thank you,
Nice day for
Hugo.
everyone.
Yes, you too. Yeah. So, Julie, I think we talked about a lot of things, but I think there's as much and maybe more to talk about another time in terms of teacher identity. But we really are out of time. One of the things we do on this program is we always ask a question towards the end. If you had a magic wand and you just had one spell you could cast, what change would you make to education that would significantly improve the lot of teachers?
It's a good question. I often used to say to parents, I don't have a magic wand. I don't have a magic wand, but we can help. We can do practical things. So I love that notion of a wand, really. But I mean, part of my strong professional identity is being a teacher of all children.
Yeah.
And I guess I'd really love to wave a wand and ensure that this is sort of felt by all teachers coming into the profession, teachers who are in the profession, teachers who've been in the profession a long time. So they didn't just feel it on an emotional level, because we all want to be, we all think we can be a teacher of all children, but so not just on an idealistic level, but that they believe themselves capable of being that teacher of all children. And in which case that wand would need to make sure that the systems were in place to ensure that the skills that all teachers needed match their belief in their own capability.
Yeah.
Big wand.
A big wand indeed. A big wand and a big wish. Yeah.
But yes, that would be my wish.
Yeah. Well, let's hope we make some advances towards that. Yeah. Julie, it's been great having you on the program. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you.
As I say, there's probably an awful lot more to talk about in terms of teacher identity. Maybe we'll get to do that at some stage in the future.
Yeah,
But Julie, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. Have a good evening. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
You too. Bye, everybody.